Hello everyone. So this was reported in the Journal.ie, but in some other newspapers too. And I heard about this a few weeks ago, but there was no concrete information. I think they were just discussing it. But I heard it a few weeks ago, and I said they probably would not go and do it. I didn't think they would do it. But apparently the government, the central government in Dublin, because Ireland has obviously a central government in Dublin, then there's obviously local governments, local councils, take for example. And obviously, I try and explain this. So every county council there's a policing board for all the elected councillors. Any councillors that are elected by the people sit in that policing board along with the Lord Mayor. And obviously members of the higher ranks of Garda Síochána and some of the councils, executives, the director of services, etc. They sit on the board too, pretty much. It's a joint policing committee board that talks, but they usually meet once a month, give or take, maybe a few times a year, depending on which council it is. But in Cavan, they must not be doing a good job because, as you've seen the statistics in Cavan, the councils must be terrified to ask the Gardaí any questions on how they're doing their job. But anyways, long story short, in Cavan, take for example, if it's ever a policing board committee, usually the media, the local media, are allowed in to have a discussion or to write up an article the next day. They say, oh, they talked about this and they talked about that. Even though you and I can't go in to listen to it, we don't know. We can only go by what the media have said or what councillors have said. And a lot of councillors are too afraid to speak anything. So we rely on mainly the local media, take for example, in Cavan. We rely on them to tell us what's happening in terms of what they're discussing, because it's important that we know too what they're discussing, because it shouldn't be behind closed doors. Now, obviously, if it's to do with national security and stuff, that's different. If it's terrorism or something, that's very sensitive stuff, very, very sensitive. But what's happening here at the moment, the government have said to local councils, imagine this too, and if I was the council at the moment, I'd be going to the council chamber now, tomorrow morning, and saying we should look for more independence from the government in Dublin, because they shouldn't have any authority to tell us what to do in our own county. To tell them the central government, the people that sit in Dáil Éireann on big huge money, they come down to Cavan and tell us what to do. I deem that as irresponsible. I need to go up and tell them what to do, because they're not doing their job in Dublin. They're talking loads of shit, but there's no action in terms of crime, immigration, etc. So they want to limit the access of the media, as I just said about the local media. They want to limit the access. So what are they trying to hide? Because they're not doing this for no reason. And obviously too, this says straight, we hear every day of the week from the Irish government, democracy, freedom and all that. We're better than Russia, etc., China and etc. We're pretty much getting there, to be totally honest. When we do these kind of things, when we're basically taking the media out of the equation and not letting the public know, because that's what's trying to happen here. They're trying to stop information getting to the public domain, and that's what's happening. It's just trying to silence. It's just trying to silence whatever information gets out of there. And meetings this joint policing committee should be held in public. They should be held in council chambers. The members of the public can walk in and listen, and even add. I would nearly say contribute too. If they wanted to eat their councillors or eat their Gardaí out of it, they should be entitled to that, because in this country you're not allowed to speak. You're allowed to go in to listen, but you're not allowed to ask any questions, because the councillors are too afraid to ask a lot of questions, so the people should be going in and asking questions. But I do think this is irresponsible, first of all, because they're obviously trying to cover up. So when we see in England the councils are trying to cover up migrant gangs, etc., etc., and along with other stuff, they're trying to cover up corruption and different things. So why is this happening? And nobody from, where's our councils in Cavan? Are any of them going to come out and ask any questions about why this has been done? Because I hear crickets. And there's not one council I've heard about in the whole country saying this. This should be held in public. First of all, this should never been allowed to happen on Zooms, etc., etc., out of the public domain. The only thing we go by is the journalists, so-called journalists in the mainstream media. But it should be the people make up their mind, and people should be able to listen and go in and contribute too. But I deem this is a very threat to democracy, to be totally honest, because it's important in communities that we know what the heads of the Gardaí are discussing. We know what the councils are discussing. We should know. It's not that we shouldn't know. We should know what exactly they're discussing, and particularly at the moment, the state of County Cavan. We should know what the councillors are they eating, because they're pretty much the Gardaí should be mortified to go near any of these councils in Cavan at the moment, considering how bad the record is. And sometimes the Garda Commissioner and stuff will be there, but the Garda Commissioner should be mortified to go into the Joint Policing Committee, because he should barely get a word out of his mouth, because I know he's a new man in the Garda Síochána, but still there's quite a problems in the Garda Síochána when it comes to corruption and comes to different things. And then obviously children disappear and the rest of that. We'll not go there, but we could go on for hours but in Garda Síochána, but they're incompetence in a lot of cases. But yeah, this is outrageous if you ask me. That and I've said this many times over the years, that the central government in Dublin shouldn't have the power it does. Because what is happening at the moment, and I don't blame the majority of the councils, they're too afraid to say anything, first of all, that the government in Dublin has all the power. And that's what happened through the Local Government Act 2001. Whatever power there was left in the local authorities in 2001 was taken away from them. They had a lot more say in different things in 2001. Now the councils don't, after that act was passed. The councils don't have much say. They have obviously a say. Councils still have a say on housing projects, etc., on public infrastructure, and in terms of the president, as presidential elections, as we were talking about. But they have very little say when it comes to other stuff. So pretty much all the power is in Dublin, and that shouldn't be the case. It should be the same as in the United States or in Germany, that, or even in Finland, for example, that states, counties in our case, have autonomy, have some kind of autonomy to serve to the government, particularly in this case. Like if I was a councillor and we had autonomy in Cavan, I'd tell the government to go shove it up the hole. That's as I tell them to do, go mind their own fucking business. And to go, I'm sure they wouldn't like if I went up to Dublin. If I went down to Dublin, and told them what to do in Dublin. If I went up to Dublin City Council and told them what to do, I'm sure they wouldn't be too pleased with it, of a person from the country coming up to tell them in the city what to do. So why the fuck should we listen to them from the city coming down to tell us what to do? And it's pretty much for whose benefit. What's this benefit? Who's benefiting here? Because it's not the media, it's not the public, it's the politicians. Because they're the only people that's benefiting in Garda Síochána Conor. Because there's obviously stuff being discussed in the Joint Police, and just reading up in the last Joint Policing Committee in Cavan, there was some serious stuff raised. There was very little questions. There was very little answers. There was questions, but there was no answers to half of the stuff. So I presume it's just to shut people up from discussing these things. And that's the simple, that's who's benefit, the politicians, the government. So, yeah, we have to get rid of this, get rid of it. The government shouldn't go ahead with it. We see what happens, but I'm of the opinion that it should be public. The joint policing committees shouldn't be controlled, because that's what's been happening here, controlled by the government. That's what the government are seeking to do. And hopefully the majority councils, even though the director services and the chief executives of the council are pretty much bound to listen to the government, they have no right to say no to the government, because the government can just sack them. Which is insane too, that the chief executive of county councils can't tell the government to go shove it. It's insane. He has to kind of been told how to jump and etc. How high to jump, etc. He can't say no to them, which is utterly insane. But let me know what you think. What do you think? Do you think this is more controlled? Do you agree with this? I don't think nearly anybody would agree with this, because it is a public. The Gardaí are funded by the taxpayer. The councils are funded by the taxpayer. You and I that go out to walk, and particularly as a citizen of Cavan, and as every citizen of Cavan watch to this, we have a right to know what is happening in our county, what the Joint Policing Committee is discussing. Both the councillors and the heads of a Garda Síochána Conor Cavan, the superintendent in Cavan, we have a right to know what they're discussing. And what's their concerns and what they're talking about and how they're going to improve safety in this county. Because at the moment in time, there's no democracy. What I mean by that is nobody's been held to account. We rely on the media, the local media, and they do very little now and again. They do now and again, they get their head right. But if, say, the people could go into the Joint Policing Committee, only people like myself, and fucking tear them out of the Gardaí, ask them tough questions, etc., on different things, and making them very, very frustrated, it would work very good for democracy, because that's the way it should be, that people can go in and ask questions. Because that's democracy, you're allowed to ask questions. But apparently not in this country. But anyway, let me know what you think, subscribe for more, and bye.